Hi, I'm Bianca Diaz and I'm here with Tina Romanelli. I work in the admissions office at Meredith College, and I was part of the summer reading committee, which was part of the group that chose Educated as its summer reading book for incoming freshmen.
Hi Bianca, I'm Tina Romanelli and I'm the director of the Learning Center and an instructor of English, and I had the pleasure of teaching Educated to a group of freshmen last year. I'm really excited to get to talk to you about this book.
Likewise.
So Bianca, what inspired you about reading Educated?
I was really inspired by the moments of resilience in her life and the ways that she showed that resilience. It really made me think about the meaning of resilience and how it's, you know, the process of having difficult situations happen to you or being in really uncomfortable or unknown situations and coming out of those situations stronger and evolved and changed in a positive way. And so there are lots of moments of resilience in this book. And I also thought about the small moments of resilience and the really major moments of resilience, because I think about that trait as being on a continuum of sorts, kind of like, you know, the moment where she is in the dance class and she shows up with, you know, an oversized t-shirt and steel toe boots, and everyone else, all the other girls, are in leotards and leggings, and that's a difficult moment for her because she has not gone to school, she has not been in groups of other children, and so she is resilient in that moment because she takes the class, you know, she speaks to the teacher and the teacher speaks to her mom, and she sort of overcomes that and continues to take the dance class in her own way and, you know, styled in her own way that's modest for her and her beliefs at the time. And then there are the moments of huge resilience, you know, overcoming so much difficulty, emotional aggression, physical aggression in her family, all of those things. So I was really inspired by her resilience and how she defined that. And it made me really rethink how I define resilience and how I can have small moments of resilience and large moments of resilience in my own life. So Tina, the last line of the book is really poignant. What did you think about her ending?
It's such a great line. It really shows both the focus on education that resilience plays a really big part of for Tara. And her education takes many different forms in the book. What I think is really fascinating about her use of the word educated as a title and her use of describing her process of becoming herself as an education is that it's not just herself, it's also a whole community of people that help her to become educated. At another point in the book, she writes, "An education is not so much about making a living as about making a person." So it's not just the skills that she's learning that make her educated, but it's the process of becoming herself and separating herself from her past, but also claiming some parts of that past. And sort of seamlessly moving, in some cases, between lots of different communities. When she goes off to school, she struggles to get acclimated, but then she's able to come home and then go back with struggle, but with also a grace that she shows through the whole book. When she becomes educated, she becomes a part of communities like the dance class that you mentioned, also her roommates at BYU, and then eventually even her graduate school community.
And you talk about education as a process of becoming a person who can interact with multiple communities. Are there places in the book where you notice that Tara relied on one of those communities to support her?
Yes. In fact, Tara does a beautiful job of explaining how community is so important to her, even when it's also very difficult for her. So her family is very difficult, but yet she finds moments of support within her family. For example, her brother Tyler helping her pass the GREs by studying her trigonometry is one example of that. Her friend Charles, who helps her in that really poignant moment of her ear infection when he hands her the Advil, and she's so shocked by the fact that she isn't experiencing pain that she's sort of used to as part of her life. But then there are other communities where support is part of the community, as in her school communities, where her professors are looking for ways to support her and advocate for her. Dr. Carey is a great example of someone who advocates for her to be able to go to Cambridge and meet Professor Steinberg, who then describes her as his Pygmalion project. And even though there are some interesting ways of thinking about being someone else's Pygmalion project, it's really a support system for her, and she learns to accept that mentoring and that support as part of her journey to becoming this new person. So Bianca, what surprised you most about the events that Tara shares from her life?
I was surprised by her compassion for her family. She writes about her parents in their origin stories early on in the book, and so we get a glimpse of her mother's upbringing, her father's upbringing, and all of the trials that they have overcome or have not overcome and have kind of internalized. And I was really surprised to see that with all of the difficulty that she experienced, the emotional abuse that she experienced within her family, she was still able to remain compassionate towards these people, as well as her brother, Sean, who she loves because that's her brother, but she also fears. And I found it really remarkable that she could hold opposing emotions within her, like love and hate, like fear and trust, like hope and dread. She really holds these emotions, these really opposing emotions, which is a difficult thing. She holds them together in relation to her family members, but she never loses that compassion towards them and that feeling that they are damaged souls also, and that they're trying to survive and make it in the world and become, the best version of themselves that they believe they can. And so that was really remarkable to me, that she would remain so compassionate and remain so non-judgmental, even through the midst of all of the turmoil that she experienced in her life.
Yes, I think it's really beautiful that she gives us such a vivid and sympathetic portrait of both her mother and her father at the beginning of the memoir, so that we experience them almost as she experienced them as a child, that we can love her father's interest in his children and his really strong desire to have them grow up following his specific thoughts about the Bible and about religion, about relationships with the government, that he's so passionate about that we can appreciate that. And of course, one of my favorite moments from the book is when Tara's mother, Faye, goes to midwife and it doesn't go so well, and she has to take her client, I guess for lack of a better word, to the hospital and pretend to the hospital that she has no idea what it is like to birth a baby, so they don't know that she's been midwifing. And it's a beautiful moment because we see Faye's strength, and we see Faye both inhabiting the role that her husband wants for her, but also making it her own and knowing when it's time to go to the government, knowing when it's time to go to the hospital. So it's this beautiful moment that we see. Through the process of the memoir, we come to understand both Faye and Jean as very different people. By the end, we understand them to be supportive or wanting to support Tara, but only if she's willing to be the person that they want her to be. So we experience that loss of her parents as a close family unit that she experiences as she goes through the memoir.
it speaks to the complexity of humanity, because there are not villains and heroes in life. You know, she really urges us not to think of her parents as villains, even though that's our instinct because of different moments in the book and how they treat her, and different situations. However, since we have gone through that process that you were just talking about, of that loss, of those little glimpses of strength and humility and support and really unconditional love, since we've lost that, we can feel the complexity of her parents as individuals. And I think that's really important, to not necessarily see the world in terms of black and white, but more so a gray, a complex, sort of messy way to live.
Yes, and another great point is the idea that as she's changing, the people around her are changing too, as are the people that she goes away from. So she sees all of these people change. No one sort of stays the same. There's no static space that remains isolated. So when she returns back into these spaces, she's dealing with a slightly different Faye, a slightly different Jean, a slightly different Sean than she did when she left. So she's accommodating that. She's recognizing their change and their humanity, and it's really a beautiful process that she goes through, even in the sort of tragic loss that she experiences.
Well, we definitely could talk about this for a long time. We do hope that the Meredith community enjoys all of their conversations. We wanted to touch upon some strategies for holding those conversations, and maybe you can choose some of these strategies to inform your discussions.
And we've been talking about some great themes: the theme of education, theme of resilience, the theme of compassion, and bringing the discussion back to those will be really helpful. Also, as we've been discussing, her narrative is a lot about what she's lost in her education, but also what she's gained. And her education has enabled her to change her social class and have very different opportunities for herself. But it also has been a process of accepting her membership in some communities. And she both accepts and rejects communities. And this is going to be an important point for us to note for our students, that they are both accepting and rejecting communities. They're bringing communities with them.
Yes.
And they may feel that the experiences that Tara has had really resonate with them, and they can really identify with her. But they may also not feel that way. They may also feel that her race or her religion and her membership in the communities that those things afford her are not things they can identify with. So they may want to talk about their process of both accepting and rejecting communities, and that's a really valid response to the book.
Absolutely, absolutely. Another point to consider is the epigraph of a book. I think often an epigraph can be a great catalyst to having a good discussion. She has 2 epigraphs in the book. These are just quotes that sort of start the book. The first one is from Virginia Woolf. It says, "The past is beautiful because one never realizes an emotion at the time. It expands later, and thus we don't have complete emotions about the present, only about the past." And the second one is by John Dewey. "I believe finally that education must be conceived as a continuing reconstruction of experience, that the process and the goal of education are one and the same thing." Looking back at an epigraph once you've finished the book can be really valuable, especially these 2 because they really reflect a lot of the themes that we've been talking about, the present and the past, and how to make meaning of those things, as well as how those things can affect our identity. And the idea of the process and the goal of education is to build meaning of our experiences. So having conversations with the students about how the epigraph relates to moments in the book and things that they can connect to those themes in the epigraph can be really valuable as well.
Yes, and allowing the students the opportunity to share the moments that were really important to them, or really beautifully written moments. One of my favorite moments in the book is when she talks about learning to read from her Bible and the close reading experience that she has, that becomes a foundation for so much of what she ends up doing in her life. So if students find the moments, whether they are in the scrapyard or in grandma over in town's living room, they speak to them in some way and they can share that with their small groups, and the professors and facilitators can also share the moments that were really important to them, and that should lead to a really rich discussion. So education and inspiration and resilience are going to look different to all of the different communities on campus that we have, but we'll be able to connect through sharing the stories of education and relishing Tara Westover's story of resilience and education. And we hope that it will bring our freshman class into our Meredith community in really fruitful ways.